Hello and welcome to the AVRUM Rosenzweig Show.
Welcome to one of the internet's best podcasts, where we dive deep into the lives of the extraordinary and fascinating people who leave an indelible mark on our world. Join us as we explore their captivating stories, remarkable achievements, and unique perspectives that shape history and inspire generations. Get ready to embark on a journey through the lives of inspiring people unlike any other.
Hi, folks, and welcome to the show. My name is AVRUM Rosenzweig, and I'm delighted to be here. Before every show, I like to talk a little bit about what you may glean from the next hour from my guest and what you might take out of his experiences in life. My guest is Sam Daley-Harris. Welcome to the show, Sam.
Great to be here.
Great to have you. I'm going to introduce you formally in 1 second. But to my viewers and listeners, I think what you're going to find over the next hour is a man who motivates others to act. Now, that's a really big deal because essentially what happens on a very personal level is when you're encouraging other people to play a role in the world in which we share, you find that it enhances your own soul. And this is something that I've been involved with for many, many years through my nonprofit organization, Via Hafta, which I started in 1996. And I'm retired from, but of course, 20 years of work getting other people to play a role in Tikkun Olam, which is repairing the world, really, really enhanced my spirit. So if you are trying to find your zone, if you're trying to find your way, a very good way of doing that is to encourage other people towards their own direction, towards their own zone. So let me take the next minute or two to introduce my guest, who is a fascinating man, a wonderful human being, and has done great things for our world. For more than 40 years, Sam Daley-Harris has devoted his life to helping everyday people discover their power to create extraordinary change. Through his leadership, training, and innovative strategy, he has inspired countless individuals and organizations to transform their passion into meaningful results-driven advocacy. Sam is the founder of Results and the Results Educational Fund, an international citizen lobby with a remarkable track record of building the political will to end hunger and poverty. Thanks to the tireless efforts of Results advocates, billions of dollars have been secured for life-saving, cost-effective programs around the world. The Educational Fund supports this mission through research, education, and community building. Sam also co-founded the Microcredit Summit Campaign alongside Nobel Peace Prize laureate Yunus and Finca founder John Hatch. Together, they pursued an ambitious vision, to say the least, empowering the world's poorest families, especially women, with microloans and financial tools to build sustainable livelihoods. Today, through his organization, Civic Courage, Sam continues to share his wisdom by training nonprofits in transformational advocacy. His approach gives volunteers the inspiration, tools, and confidence to step into leadership and take bold action they might never have imagined possible. Sam captured this spirit in his book, Reclaiming Our Democracy, first published in 1994 and then reissued in 2024. The book reminds us that while many people want to engage in democracy, they often don't know where to start. Sam shows them the way. Martin Luther King said, "The time is always right to do right." And I think we're going to launch into this interview with that quote. What do you think Martin Luther King meant by that, Sam?
Well, I think in that particular context, it's like, don't sit on the sidelines anymore. It's time to get involved.
Do you find that the people who are not involved are not because they're fearful? Are they lazy? Not a term that I'm crazy about. Or are they hopeless?
Well, I think it's all of those. There's a discouragement, there's a powerlessness, there's a cynicism. If I could, I was interviewed in the US on a national radio interview that kind of answered the question you just asked. And I want to just go over, this was question number 2 in a 13-minute interview That went to 350 radio stations in the United States. I was really moved by how vulnerable the host was. Question number 2, the passive nature to our politics today, you can feel beat down by it. I mean, this is my career and I feel beat down by it, he said to me. I don't participate the same way others do because I'm a political journalist, but I do have to pay attention. It's a grind. It's a grind, Sam. I mean, I know you know that. What am I feeling? What is the way out of that? And I think the angst and the discouragement that he was expressing for millions and millions of people all around the world. And if I could, the first response I made to him was Apollo astronaut Rusty Schweickart said, "We aren't passengers on Spaceship Earth, we're the crew."
Yes.
Well, I mean, my question to him was, are we? And if we are, how does crew operate? And the second thing I said to him was, futurist and climate activist Alex Steffen said, in fact, these days, cynicism is obedience. Well, yeah, if I'm cynical, I'm obedient to the way things are. I'm not going to do anything about it. Why would I, if nothing I do makes a difference? So I think his question was such an expression about how many, many, many people feel in North America and frankly around the world.
Do you think politicians are happier when people are not so cynical and are in fact active?
Well, I guess it depends on the politician and the issue, but I'm sure they would prefer it if they had more attentive constituents. Then they could do things as a leader that a leader would do who has attentive constituents. So I don't know. I'm sure it depends on who we're talking about.
I was brought up in a rabbinical home in Kitchener, Ontario, Canada. My father was an old-time activist, Sam. Like, he got out there in front when there were problems and courageously and bravely spoke loudly and fought against the injustice that was happening at the time. He brought people into our home to live with us, sometimes for a week, sometimes for a month, sometimes for 2 years. So, as I've always said through the years when I speak, my parents basically brought the outside world inside into our home. When I came to Toronto at 13 years old to go to Talmud school, and then later on when I joined the United Jewish Appeal, I was very surprised that most people did not have that sense of activism inside of them. I got very disappointed and I became very frustrated and I started hitting people over the head with hammers, metaphorically. Do you think in our Western society that we are raising young people to be courageous and brave in light of injustices?
In simple terms, no. But if I could tell a story of how I learned my understanding of that question and that lesson almost 50 years ago, and it's really the story of how I got involved in activism. And it was developed by Harvard professor Marshall Gans, who's actually, his father was a rabbi. And Marshall Gans worked for Cesar Chavez for a decade in California, many decades ago. And he developed this story of self, which basically asks, what happened in your life and what decisions did you make that got you to this commitment? So if I could, I'm going to tell my story of self, what happened in my life.
Please.
And what decisions I made. But I really want your viewers and your listeners to think about their own. What happened in your life and what decisions did you make that got you to this podcast and the kind of involvement that you're engaged in already? So here's mine, and it gets to my lesson almost 50 years ago about the involvement of students, really young people. I have a bachelor's degree and a master's degree in music.
Music, yeah.
And I played percussion instruments in the Miami Philharmonic Orchestra for 12 years and taught high school music. And 45 years ago, I founded the Anti-Poverty Lobby. Results in a lot of times I'm asked, music, poverty lobby, what's the connection? And when I look back in my life, there's certain experiences that start pointing me in a different direction. The death of a friend around high school graduation in 1964 and the assassination of US Senator Robert Kennedy around college graduation in 1968 got me to asking the questions of purpose. Why am I here? What am I here to do? What's my purpose? 9 years later, it's now 1977, I'm invited to a presentation on ending world hunger put on by the Hunger Project. And I go to this event thinking, well, hunger's inevitable. What do I know? I'm a musician. I'm thinking, well, it's inevitable because there must be no solutions. Again, what do I know? Because if there were solutions, somebody would have done something by now. But I go to this event and it's obvious right away, there's no mystery to growing food, clean water, basic health. I'm not hopeless about the perceived lack of solutions. I'm hopeless about human nature. People will just never get around to doing the things that can be done. But there's one human nature I have some control over, my own, and my questions, why am I here? What am I here to do? So I get involved in a big way. This is the end of the story. In 1978 and 1979, I spoke to 7,000 high school students, classroom by classroom, on ending world hunger. And before I went into the first classroom, I read some statements from Jimmy Carter's Commission on World Hunger calling for the political will to end hunger. So I asked 7,000 high school students, what's the name of your member of Congress? I don't want to know if you met him. I don't want to know if you wrote him, just the name. Out of 7,000 asked, 200, fewer than 3%, could answer correctly. Over 6,800, over 97% could not tell me the name of their member of Congress. And results grew out of this gap between the calls for the political will to end hunger on the one hand, and the lack of basic information on who represented us in Washington on the other. Now, by the way, these students are now in their 60s who couldn't tell me the name of their member of Congress in the late 70s. But so, no, I don't think we do that good a job of helping young people know how they can engage effectively. And then offering what I talk about a lot, and I won't go into this second, but I will in a moment maybe, structured support so they can have a better chance of success. And not you're on your own, good luck, call back, let us know how it goes, but rather building these communities of support.
I like your spirit, by the way. You have a good spirit. You're animated. You know, Sam, I'm really curious. I want to take this a little bit further. In Judaism, the Havdalah Kamocha, loving your brother and your sister, is paramount to our teachings. It's in the Torah something like 36 times. In Christianity, Jesus is known as a kind, good, caring, loving person. I think it's safe to say that Islam stresses 5 various different fundamental pillars of giving and caring. What I find perturbing is that we are fundamentally brought up on Judeo-Christian values. Every parent worth their salt talks to their little kids about being good, about sharing, about giving. Don't hit that other kid, right? When does it stop translating into action?
Well, I mean, I think in some ways, it doesn't start translating into action much when we tell our kids about it and don't model it. If it's something we hear but don't see, if something we hear but don't observe, then, you know, I don't know that we've gone very far down that journey. And
why don't we model it as parents?
Again, I think it's like most people don't know what to do, don't know how to be effective. Let me give your viewers and listeners just this idea. The subtitle of the book, Reclaiming Our Democracy, is Every Citizen's Guide to Transformational Advocacy. So it's mainly about this thing called transformational advocacy. And everyone knows transactional, sign the petition, transaction complete. But with transformational advocacy, you're trained, encouraged, and succeed at doing things as an advocate you never thought you could do, like meet with a member of parliament and bring them on board to your issue. And when you do these things you never thought you could do, you see yourself differently. That's the transformation. And so I think too often people, when it comes to bigger issues and policy change, are more aware of transactional, sign that petition, email form letters, give us your name and your postal code or zip code, and we'll send it for you. Those transactional types of actions. And if I could just tell you this one survey in the United States, there's a group called the Congressional Management Foundation, and they asked nonprofit advocacy staff what their primary tactic was. And 79% said an email form letter. Again, give us your name and your postal code and we'll send it for you. 79% said their primary tactic was an email form letter. And they asked congressional staff, how effective is email form letters? 3% said an email form letter is highly effective. So we're being fed these things that the recipients are saying aren't that effective. And so we're in this like loop of ineffective action, maybe not much of a change on our part as a result, and we don't see it. And let me tell this one quick story. I was talking to this woman. Her name is Maxine Thomas. I always say she's amazing, but my thing is we're all amazing if we get the right training. She said to me, I had a heart for service, but I was clueless about advocacy, especially political advocacy. And it's a much longer story about her journey. And she had a lived experience of poverty, but eventually she finds Results, the group that I founded, and she gets a scholarship to go to Washington, D.C. for her first ever congressional meetings. And she spends a day meeting with both senators and members of Congress. At the end of the day, she said, I was euphoric. Yes. I was on this high and felt I was part of something revolutionary. She started at I was clueless and ended up at I was euphoric. That's transformational. That's transformational advocacy. And going back to your question, I don't think parents often receive opportunities like that, and consequently their kids don't receive those opportunities. And so we're often engaged in gestures. Again, if we're mostly doing email form letters, but only 3% of congressional staff say that's highly effective, there's a disconnect there.
Sort of continue on the line of human behavior. I often, ask myself, would I have been a righteous Gentile during the war? Would I have saved a Jewish family or another type of family who was under siege at the risk of my own life, at the risk of my own family's life? And then I kind of take it further and I think to myself, are righteous Gentiles born that way? Are they born courageous and brave with this great sense of, I need to do this. I need to act in order to save someone else's life, perhaps because one day I'll need them to save my life. But I think that when you take a look at the statistics having to do with the war and how many righteous Gentiles there were vis-a-vis the overall population, it was very tiny. So are people born with empathy, Sam? Can you develop it over time?
Yeah, I would not say that people are born with empathy. I think you learn it. You're around it or you're not around it and you don't learn it. I don't think it's a function of you're born with it, you're not kind of thing. I think it's something that it's something that we learn.
There's an organization that actually teaches empathy here in Canada, and the name of the organization slipped my mind. However, the woman who started it wrote a book, and she tells a story about how new mother took her baby into a classroom, and the idea was to teach the students about empathy. And the mother said, "Is there anyone here who would like to hold the child?" And there was a fellow in the back, a young man with a mohawk haircut, with piercings, kind of the type of kid where you'd be very hesitant about having them hold your child.
Yep.
But he said he wanted to hold the child. So he came forward, and she had to say yes. And she handed him the child, and the baby sort of latched onto him in a way that the baby had not done with the mother. And she was very envious and curious. And he said to her, "Can everybody be loved?" And her response was, "Well, of course. Why are you asking me that?" He says, "Because my father murdered my mother in front of me. And I thought that was me. I thought that was my fault." Anyways, my point is
Yeah.
that it seems as though, like you said before, if you give people the opportunity to learn, to develop their empathy, to develop their caring and their love and their advocacy, that they can step into it and
Yeah.
accomplish
Yeah.
great things, right?
Yes. And I'm familiar with her work. She was or is an Ashoka Fellow. And that work on empathy has been lifted up by Ashoka, this organization that
There you go.
looks for social entrepreneurs, as she became.
But what were your mom and dad like?
My mom and dad. My dad was the grandson of Rabbi David Schlossberg of Mer Sharim in what I guess might have been Palestine at the time. He passed away in 1918. The grandfather. My father. I know his yurtside is coming up, and we get to tell a little bit in Minyan about whomever we're saying yurtside for. And I was thinking of this. I'm going to say it right now. Imagine this. It's Memorial Day in the United States, and in our little town of West Miami, my father is dressed up as Uncle Sam, and he's either on a decorated bicycle, a convertible, or a horse, riding in the Memorial Day parade as Uncle Sam. Okay, that's number one. Number two, it's Wednesday night, and he's at the West Miami Town Hall commission meeting because at the last 20 years of his life, he either had a column or his own little community newspaper. And number three, it's every morning and every evening, he's on the phone trying to get a minyan, because in West Miami, it was becoming less and less Jewish and more Cuban American at that time. So he was always scuffling for in his case, his 10th man. And he was a food manufacturer. So my mother, who passed just days before her 101st birthday, born in 1918, died 18 days before her 101st birthday, and had 18 great-grandchildren. The only time she wasn't home for dinner was on election night or primary election night, because she worked the polls on every election in our little town at my elementary school in West Miami, Florida, kind of thing. And it was the 1950s upbringing, and then it became the 60s. But I always say the 60s arrived a decade late in Miami. But they were really wonderful people, and it's not a particular mystery where I got some of my civic engagement from.
Yeah, so you watch them as parents, right? They role modeled, as you said before.
Yeah.
Which is key, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I want to add this. I don't know that there was much of a Tikkun Olam. There was the charity box, but it was also all very local, which is important. But again, it was 1950s. I don't know that there was much global thinking anyway, whether it's on environment or on poverty or on whatever. But yeah, it was, I'm grateful.
What were your parents' names?
Morris, my father, Moshe, Meshi, and my mother was Shirley Shandel.
Morris and Shirley.
Yes.
I can see them now.
Okay.
Pericles in ancient Athens said, just because you do not take an interest in politics doesn't mean politics won't take an interest in you. Powerful statement. Agreed, Sam?
Yes. Yep. Absolutely.
What's the
Yeah.
power behind that? How do you define that?
Well, I mean, whether we like to admit it or not, our lives are affected by what decisions are made by our elected officials. But there we are being affected, and yet not knowing where the dials are or what to do about it. If I can just share this one story, I'm doing my 117th in-person or Zoom talk, not like a podcast, but like a lecture this coming week. And so in the last 20 months, so I get people's discouragement and I get people's cynicism about their ability to make a difference. And over the course of the last year and a half or two, I've come to meet this professor, and I want to share about his book. He's a Stanford professor. His name is Jamil Zaki.
Mhm.
And he wrote a book called, I love this title, Hope for Cynics, The Surprising Science of Human Goodness.
Oh, good. I like that.
The
Yes.
book is Hope for Cynics, The Surprising Science of Human Goodness.
Oh, I like that. Yes.
And in the book, he said, if you're cynical, it's like you're playing poker and you fold your hand before the game even starts. And I say, well, if you're a civic cynic, it's like you fold your hand before the parliament is sworn in, before the first bill is introduced. And so we need to find an organization that will help us open our hand, not fold it and put it away. And I want to share this one last bit about that. Where I talk to people about what to look for and whether an organization is working to deliver transformational advocacy.
Mhm.
And I list three things. I heard a lecture recently was punched up number one. The number one is recruitment and community building. Recruitment is the organization brings people in, not just to build an e-blast list, but to form them into local chapters so they're not working alone. It kind of goes back to the bowling alone, and we're not engaging together much. So recruitment is forming people into local chapters, and the community building is the organization might have a monthly whole of organization webinar with guest speakers and Q&A and inspiration. So recruitment and community building, does the organization offer that? 2, training. How do you get the meeting with the elected official? How do you plan for the meeting? What do you ask for in the meeting? How do you write a letter to the editor? 2, training. 3, breakthroughs. The organization encourages its members to have breakthroughs, to do things that they didn't think they could do. In the book, there's a drawing, a small circle on one side labeled your comfort zone, and to the side is a much larger circle labeled where the magic happens.
Mhm.
You're looking for an organization that will not kick you out, but encourage you out of your comfort zone over to where the magic happens. Recruitment and community building, training, and encouraging breakthroughs. And I think we're going to have in the program notes a sign-up sheet where folks can let me know they would like me to help them find an organization that works to deliver transformational advocacy, not just the transaction, but where you change in the process.
Theodore Roosevelt said the first duty of an American citizen then is that he shall work in politics. And of course, John F. Kennedy, let us not seek the Republican answer or the Democratic answer, but the right answer. Let us not seek to fix, excuse me, to fix the blame for the past, let us accept our own responsibility for the future. And Barack Obama, change is brought about because ordinary people do extraordinary things.
Yeah.
It's interesting because I think Obama's dead on. I think you are finding regular folk. So people who work 9 to 5 and they come home at the end of the day, spend time with their family, maybe watch a good TV series, right?
Yep.
We'll call those regular folks, right?
Yep.
And then somehow you encourage them, you train them, you teach them to become active in their community or in their state, their province. But what I'm curious about is who are those people, Sam, who take the next step because of you or because of other tools that are out there? And who are the ones who just don't hear you really clearly?
Yeah. I have to say, don't forget my first one of recruitment and community building. And you said, who are those people? And I kind of put it back on us again, the chapters that we're building or the volunteer leaders that we're developing, that we have to keep doing recruitment.
Yes.
I don't know, tabling at the farmer's market or whatever it is, so that there are more of the folks you're saying coming, you might say, off the sidelines. Let me tell this quick story. There's a woman, she was a volunteer when she told me this story. Now she's on staff of Citizens Climate Lobby. I know there are chapters in Canada and the US and other countries. She said, when I first got involved in Citizens Climate Lobby, I was suffering from climate trauma.
Yes.
I would read Bill McKibben's book, Earth, and I would weep at home and I would weep at work. She said, then I joined Citizens Climate Lobby, and 18 months later, I was co-leading a workshop on building relationships with members of Congress and editorial writers. She said, our executive director said, we're betting the farm on relationships. Now go get a relationship with your member of parliament and your editorial writer. And she said, well, what in the world does a relationship with a member of parliament look like? And how do you get a relationship with an editorial writer? She said, some in the organization, and I'm going to give this last quote and end here, use the model of a work relationship. She said, my relationship model is different. I adore romantic relationships. So I use romance as my model. And she goes on, she says, that first meeting with the editorial writer, it's like a blind date. Only you've decided beforehand, you're going to marry this fellow.
Yes.
You're going to be sweet and interesting. If it doesn't work out with the editorial writer, you're going to marry one of his friends at the newspaper, environment writer, science writer, business editor. Someone at this paper will find you interesting and compelling. At the end of her spiel, she said, I met with 20 congressional offices over 4 days, some years ago. She said, going into their offices was hard. I had to let go a lot of emotional baggage. I could no longer judge them or hold hostility in my heart toward them. I had to let go of my fear of climate change and my fear that they wouldn't listen to me. I had to center myself in love, releasing fear and centering in love. This is sacred and profound work. End of quote. So she started at climate trauma and ended at sacred and profound. That's transformational. And that's the arc to transformational advocacy.
You know, you've quoted the Pew study asking people how they generally felt about politics down in the States. Many of them feel angry, 10% feel hopeful, 4% were actually excited, which means that 96% or so were not excited. You talked a moment ago about this woman weeping because of her fear of what climate change might do to the earth, and which we share. And I'm wondering, Sam, you must have met so many people who are at home convinced that they have an inability to act and therefore are quite sad about the world in which we live because they're not part of the change, as Gandhi said, right? This is that's tragic, isn't it?
It is, and that's part of why I want to make sure we put the sign-up sheet in the program notes, so maybe people can get connected, or I'll be doing it next Thursday when I do my next talk. And let me tell a quick story. This tragic
I love your
murder.
stories, by the way.
Pardon me?
You're a great storyteller.
Okay, good. Well, this tragic murder in the United States of this conservative activist, and I've been writing this little story 9 days before that heinous act, and 6 miles from that university, Utah Valley University, more than 24 Utahns, volunteers, started a 3.5-hour hike with their Republican U.S. senator. And their issue was climate change. And I talked to one of the lead volunteers. I said, wait a minute, where did this come from? He said, well, our senator now took Mitt Romney's seat, was first elected to the House of Representatives in 2017, was when he took office. And he announced he was going to have an 8-hour town hall meeting / hike. And I don't know if I could do 3 hours, but anyway, 8 people showed up, 6 of them from Citizens Climate Lobby. And on that hike, somebody said, well, what are you going to do about carbon? He said, I was the mayor of Provo, Utah. I'd never thought of the issue of carbon, et cetera. But the bottom line is, people need to know that some other people, like a couple of dozen of them, are hiking for 3.5 hours with their Republican senator, and the issue that they're working on is climate change. That's kind of a head bending.
Yes.
That, wait a minute, I don't think, and I'm going to stop with this part. When he was in the House of Representatives a couple of years later, 2018 or a little after that, he founded the Conservative Climate Caucus. And at the end of last year, there were 87 Republicans on the Conservative Climate Caucus. Now, some of it was BS and some of it was committed kind of thing. But you shouldn't get involved with me if you're not willing to deal with slow progress. But progress.
There's a sense amongst many people that politicians don't do anything. They don't make changes. They don't work hard. Have you been able to see past that stereotype in many ways?
Yeah. Well, let me, one more. See, a lot of times I'm asked, well, it changed her life or it changed his life, but
yeah,
did anything in the world change? And I love to tell the story. Results started lobbying on child survival in 1984, when UNICEF, the UN Children's Fund, was reporting 40,000 child deaths a day from preventable things, malnutrition coupled with measles, for example. And Results would lobby every year, 85, 86, 93, 94, 2001, 2002. Well, the global child death rate had fallen by 66% over the last 41 years, from 40,000 a day in 1984, the early 80s, to 13,125 a day in 2023, still scandalously high. But still, that didn't happen from nothing. I mean, in your little introduction, you talked about billions of dollars that was directed toward things like child survival and maternal. Well, okay, that's nice, but did anything change? Yeah, 10 million child lives, 10 million fewer child deaths a year now compared to the early 1980s. And so I'm going to just keep telling this story briefly. So then we had a Mr. Musk and a Mr. Rubio and a Mr. Trump in the United States who really started attacking these programs. And the Lancet announced that there's likely to be 14 million additional deaths, about 4 or 5 million of child deaths by 2030 because of some of these cuts. This is the end of the story. On July 23rd, the House of Representatives Appropriations Committee, not the Democrats, the House Appropriations Committee basically rejected President Trump's deep cuts to global health for 2026. And I can give a couple, but I'll give one example. Maternal and child health is one of the accounts that drove these falling child deaths. It was funded this year at $915 million. President Trump asked for a 90+% cut to $85 million. The House Appropriations Committee agreed to the full $915 million for next fiscal year, fiscal year 2026. So you asked, well, but do they do anything? And the answer is this year, 2 House Republicans and 2 House Democrats got 128 of their colleagues to sign a letter to the top appropriators asking for robust funding for maternal and child health. And we don't know. Well, the Senate has to act next, and then President Trump needs to sign a bill, of which this will be a small portion. But yeah, I've seen the action of volunteers who would wake up their members of Congress to the possibility of reducing child deaths dramatically. In my case, this is all gray hair over here, over the last 41 years, and that didn't happen from nothing. It happened because people educated themselves, maybe nervous finger called the editorial writer or called the scheduler to get an appointment with their elected official.
Yeah, it's actually quite fascinating that when you read the literature, when you read documentation about our world today versus, let's say, 50 years ago, 75 years ago, there's far more medical care around the world than there was then. There's far more nutrition. And less child death because people are eating better. The level of wealth has risen, not enough in all the countries in the world, but it is rising. So when people are cynical about our world, they say, well, nothing changes. In fact, things are getting worse. The truth of the matter, in many ways, it's getting much better.
Yes, and people don't know that.
Right, people don't know that. I am absolutely fascinated by your resume having to do with Microcredit Summit Campaign, which was founded by Muhammad Yunus, a very auspicious human being, Sam Daley-Harris, my guest today, and John Hatch. If I were to ask you, what is your legacy in life, would that be it?
No, I would say that my legacy will be in hopefully hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of people who somehow or other got empowered beyond their wildest dreams to make a difference, not having a clue who I am necessarily. Knowing what their empowerment is, not necessarily exactly where it might have come from, let's say, but it's really, I've not been on staff of results since 1995. I'm emeritus on the board. So this kind of empowerment continues with, for example, child survival as one example. So I think the legacy is in the empowerment of citizens. Maybe too little, not enough citizens. That's why my 117th talk is next week. Because
got to keep doing it.
Exactly.
How do you feel about yourself, Sam?
I'm just grateful. I'm grateful for life. I'm grateful for the opportunity to make a difference. And I'm grateful to talk to you because I get to share with people the possibility that their lives are. I want to tell this story. I was talking with the head of organizing for a group that everyone listening, watching this interview will know. I'm not going to say their name. And this may be 7 years ago. He said to me, we can't let our volunteers write letters to the editor or op-eds because they'll get it wrong and misrepresent the organization. Protecting their brand was more important than empowering their members. That's transactional. Citizens Climate Lobby, the year before COVID, their volunteers had 4,300 letters to the editor, op-eds and editorials published that year, 2019. One group saying they'll get it wrong and misrepresent the organization. Citizens Climate Lobby saying, well, what do we have to do to help them get it right? And give that to them. And the results was thousands of letters, op-eds, and editorials published. So, there are a lot of groups that won't empower you. I'm sorry. And one of the things that I say why they won't empower you is the fear of making big asks of volunteers.
You were saying.
I'll make a little tiny ask of you, and you might do a little tiny thing, and it'll make a very tiny difference, and you'll get bored at some point and go away. And you need to find an organization that's not afraid to make a few big asks and support you big time too, for the difference that you want to make.
I started an organization and I ran it for 20 years. And I was all about taking big leaps into the very, very deep end and seeing what we could accomplish in a big way. We worked in Zimbabwe, in rural Zimbabwe, helping with mother-to-child transmission of HIV. We worked in the rainforests of Guyana, and we worked on the streets of Toronto. And we were taking risks all over the place. Why do these organizations not do the big asks? Why don't they dive right in?
Yeah. Again, the simplistic part is the fear of making big asks. And why a fear of making big asks? Fear of getting rejected, fear of no, fear of someone will walk away. The vision is not there. There's this great quote that says, "Be outrageous. It's the only place that isn't crowded."
That's great. I love that.
And I think it's true. And we have find an organization that will help you be outrageous. Outrageous with your love, and outrageous with your commitment, and outrageous with your advocacy.
It's a great way of saying it. I'm very curious about you as a human being and what you've accomplished to date and how that plays out internally with you. As an example, we talked a moment ago about microcredit around the world, which you were part of founding. It works to ensure that 175 million of the world's poorest families, especially the women in those families, are receiving credit for self-employment and other financial and business services by the year 2015. At this time, when this statement was made, by the year 2015, I believe those numbers were close to being met. When I was running Via Hafta, my organization, we actually looked into microcredit. But my question really is I know from my work personally, I'm deeply proud of it. But I can honestly tell you, in terms of measurements, I have really very little idea as to who I've impacted.
Yeah.
Like you talked about, your legacy is going to be impacting upon hundreds of thousands of people. It's probably true. But do you find that sometimes that man or that woman will come back to you and say, Sam, you have no idea how you impacted my life?
Yeah, absolutely. Because I get that opportunity with all these calls that I do, and Zoom calls, in-person lectures, or whatever. You mentioned HIV AIDS. I don't want to know. Just quickly. There's this photo that I use in my presentation. In President Trump's first term, the Global Fund to Fight AIDS, Tuberculosis, and Malaria was being replenished, and President Trump asked for a 29% cut, and it's a longer story. But I show this photo with, it's of Margaret Smith of Dallas, Texas, holding her U.S. Senator Ted Cruz's hands with two hands. And she said to me, I learned in results that I hold Senator Cruz's hands with two hands, and I don't let go until I finish my laser talk on the Global Fund to Fight AIDS, Tuberculosis, and Malaria. And that was the first year that Ted Cruz ever said yes, 2019, to one of Results in Texas's requests. He co-sponsored a resolution, and the president's 29% cut didn't happen. and said it was a 16% increase. Get to today. President Trump's budget for next year, FY26, it starts technically October 1st. The Global Fund to Fight AIDS, TB, and Malaria is at 1.65 billion US dollars this year. And he asked for 800 million next year, a little more than 50% cut. Well, the House, again, Appropriations Committee agreed to 1.5 billion for next year. Slight decrease, but nothing like what Trump proposed. That's the House in the United States, not the Democrats, the House Appropriations Committee. The Global Fund to Fight AIDS, Tuberculosis, and Malaria and their partners, including the work you did, have saved 65 million lives since 2002. Where do you read in the newspaper 65 million lives saved? You tend not to, really. And again, I'll stop here. The same 2 House Republicans and 3 House Democrats got 160 of their House colleagues to sign one letter to the top appropriators asking for full funding for the Global Fund and the President's Emergency Fund for AIDS.
Are you then a hopeful man?
Well, yeah, I am. I have great reasons not to be hopeful, but I have great reasons to be hopeful. My whole thing is, like, I can either look at that murder in Utah or the 24 volunteers in Utah who hiked for 3.5 hours with their Republican senator on talking about climate change. I can either look at the president's cut for maternal and child health by 90+%, or I could look at the volunteer action that led to the House Appropriations Committee rejecting that cut. And, you know, it's yeah.
Can I give you a quick quiz?
Yes.
Who was the primary author of the Declaration of Independence, a key document advocating liberty from Britain?
Oh, Thomas Jefferson?
Thomas Jefferson.
Yeah.
You're 1 for 1. Which leader co-founded the National Women's Suffrage Association in 1869 and tirelessly advocated for women's right to vote?
Well, I don't know if it would be Elizabeth Cady Stanton or
Close.
Yeah.
Susan Anthony.
Okay. Susan B. Anthony.
We'll give you half on that. What was the central message of Martin Luther King Jr.'s speech, I Have a Dream, in 1963?
Well, that his grandchildren and children would have the same abilities and liberties and freedom as anyone else in the United States.
Yes. Advocacy for civil rights, racial equality, and an end to segregation. The grassroots advocacy organization.
This is not a multiple choice test?
Not the way I printed it up, no. The grassroots advocacy organization Results, founded in 1980 by Sam Daley-Harris, my guest today, focuses primarily on which global issue?
Well, global health in particular.
Yes.
But also in economic development and domestic issues in the United States.
It's beautiful what you've done, Sam. And finally, which U.S. president popularized the phrase bully pulpit, describing the presidency as a powerful platform for advocacy?
Teddy Roosevelt.
Yes, excellent. That's beautiful. So I want to tell you that I have been playing around with AI for the last few months and asking it to write a poem about my guests. So I have an ode to Sam Daley-Harris.
Okay.
Do you use AI at all?
A little bit.
Okay. When it comes to technology, are you young at heart?
Growing there. Growing there.
You don't give up on it?
No, not yet. Not yet. Actually, my son does analytics and player development for the Arizona Diamondbacks baseball team.
See, really? Isn't that impressive?
Very into the Moneyball.
Yeah, Mo's a great movie. Are your kids involved in advocacy?
Well, my daughter is a therapist. She's 24, and her clients are primarily 3 to 10 with some teens and young adults. and it is a certain kind of advocacy
Yes.
in its own way, for sure.
Yeah. Are they proud of their dad?
I think so. And their mom.
Good stuff. Good stuff. All right. A note to Sam Daley-Harris. For 40 years, he lit the way so voices once silent could rise and say, we matter, we lead, we dare to be heard, transforming conviction into action and words. He dreamed of a world where hunger would cease, where poverty's grip gave way to release. So in 1980, results took flight, an army of citizens armed with what was right. What with that with will that could bend the halls of power. He taught the ordinary to seize their hour. Billions secured for the lives of the poor, each victory opening yet one more door. In 95, with Yunus and Hatch by his side, a bold vision spread the world far and wide. Microcredit, a seed in a woman's hand, grew hope and renewal across the land. 100 million families reached by 2007, a promise preached. Civic courage came next in line, a training ground where voices shine, where nonprofits learn to rise, engage, and citizens write on democracy's page. His book declares, reclaim what is yours, a democracy waiting behind closed doors. Critics acclaim its wisdom and grace, a guide to empower, a call to embrace. From NPR to PBS Air, he carried his mission everywhere. An advocate's heart steady and strong reminds us that courage has been here all along. So here's to Sam, whose steadfast art has kindled a fire in countless hearts. A builder of movements, a teacher of trust. He showed us that change begins with us.
Thank you, AVRUM and AI.
Thank you, AVRUM and AI.
You had to put something in.
My middle name is Isaac, by the way, so it is AI. Do you have a middle name?
Ronald.
Ronald. Okay. If you do you have a bucket list?
No. It's just getting this message of transformational advocacy out there. That's my bucket list.
Is there one particular thing or area that you just want to accomplish so badly? You wrote a book, you started organizations, you're out there advocating for people to advocate, but is there one particular thing, maybe going fishing or something?
Not particularly. Actually, my wife and I was born and raised, oh, you're going to love this, from Canada. I was born and raised in Miami, Florida, and I never saw falling snow until I was 25 years old.
Isn't that something?
And so my wife and I work from South Florida 3 months in the winter because I'm a tenderfoot and I can't take it. So that's my fishing. Oh, yeah. And an apartment on the Atlantic Ocean. It's glorious.
Good for you. Good for you.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank everybody for watching and for listening. It's been a fantastic interview. I think it's so important to talk about the essence of our spirit, of our heart, and what lies within it. I would argue within everybody, the potential to give, the potential to care, to love, to advocate on behalf of ourselves and on behalf of our community. I think it's there. And like you said, Sam, it's just a question of sort of stirring it, right? Prodding it, right? Pushing people forward. And I think what people can take away from this interview is your tenacity and your ability to commit to that concept of, okay, folks, we can all wake up if we give it a shot. Would you think that's accurate?
I think so.
Yeah. Are you tired at all? Are you weary?
No.
You're not. See, that's magnificent in and of itself. Sam, I want to thank you very much for being my guest.
Yeah, it's a thrill.
And we look forward to doing this again in the future, and lots of accolades for your work, and you should only show success. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for watching and for listening. Until we meet again, as they say in Yiddish, sei gesund, and it's been great being with you. Thank you so much.